Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Layla Miller, and I'm an architect. For most of my life, the single greatest project I ever worked on wasn't a building of steel and glass, but the painstaking construction of my own invisibility. I became an expert at it, a master of disappearing behind my own work so that someone else could stand in the spotlight. I never imagined that the biggest betrayal of my career, orchestrated by my own brother, would also become the moment of my greatest liberation. It was a liberation that happened live, on camera, in front of the entire world, all because of a single, nearly invisible mark I had hidden deep within my own designs. What would you do if the people who were supposed to build you up spent your whole life tearing you down brick by brick? Before I reveal how a nearly invisible watermark on a blueprint changed my entire life, I want to welcome all of you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever felt underestimated or had someone else take credit for your hard work, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to join this incredible community of people who understand that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to say. It all started, as these things so often do, around a dining room table. The scent of my mother's roast chicken, a smell that was supposed to mean comfort and family, filled the air, but all I felt was a familiar, low-grade anxiety. This was the stage for our family's longest-running play, a drama in which I was perpetually cast as a background character. My brother, Ethan, 2 years my senior, held the lead role. He was born for it, with a smile that could sell sand in the desert and a confidence that never seemed to waver. Mostly because it was built on a foundation I had laid for him. My father, Arthur Miller, sat at the head of the table. He was the founder of Miller & Son Architecture, a name that had been a source of quiet pain for me since I was a teenager. It was never meant to be Miller & Children or Miller & Miller. It was always for him, Ethan. My mother, Eleanor, was the director of this production, always smoothing over the narrative, ensuring Ethan's story was the only one being told. She'd pat my hand and say things like, "It's wonderful how you support your brother, dear. You two have always been such a great team." A great team. It sounded so collaborative, so wholesome. But we weren't a team. I was the engine, and he was the shiny chassis, getting all the polish and admiration while I did the heavy lifting in the dark. This dynamic wasn't a recent development. It was woven into the fabric of our childhood. I remembered a 4th grade science fair. I had spent weeks building a detailed model of the solar system, with a tiny hand crank that made the planets orbit the sun. I was so proud of it. The night before the fair, Ethan, who was in 6th grade, realized he'd completely forgotten his own project. Panic set in, but not for long. My parents had a solution. "Layla, your model is so advanced," my father had said, his voice reasonable. "It's really middle school level. Why don't you let Ethan present it? His topic was on planetary motion, anyway. It's a perfect fit." I had stared at them, my 9-year-old mind struggling to process the injustice. "But I made it," I whispered. My mother had knelt down, her hands on my shoulders. "I know, sweetie, and we're so proud of you for it. But think of it as helping your brother. That's what family does. We help each other." Ethan, smelling opportunity, jumped in. "Yeah, Layla. I'll tell everyone my little sister helped me." He didn't, of course. He won first prize. The local paper took a picture of him, beaming next to my solar system. The caption read, "Future astronomer Ethan Miller." I kept the newspaper clipping, not out of pride, but as a reminder. It was the first blueprint of a lifetime of being erased. Years later, not much had changed, only the stakes were higher. The science fairs had become boardrooms, and the school projects had become multi-million-dollar contracts. I had followed my passion and become an architect, a real one, with a degree and a license and a mind brimming with ideas. I joined the family firm, naive enough to believe that my professional qualifications would finally make them see me. But at Miller & Son, I was still the little sister who was good at the technical stuff. I designed, I drafted, I solved the impossible geometric puzzles. Ethan, who had a business degree and an allergy to drafting software, was the face of the firm. He would take my meticulously rendered blueprints, my innovative concepts, and present them as his own. He learned just enough of the jargon to sound convincing to clients who were more interested in a firm handshake than in the physics of cantilevered structures. And my father, Arthur, not only allowed it, he encouraged it. "Layla, you're brilliant, but you don't have the touch," he'd say. "Ethan connects with people. It's a perfect partnership." It wasn't a partnership. It was theft, sanitized with the language of family and teamwork. The night of the roast chicken dinner, the air was crackling with a new, massive opportunity. The RFP had just been released for the Nexus Tower. It wasn't just another building. It was a landmark. Ethelred Corporation, a global tech giant, wanted to build its new headquarters, a tower that would redefine the city's skyline and set a new standard for sustainable, smart architecture. It was the kind of project architects dream of. My mind was already on fire with possibilities, with shapes and materials and light. I had brought a few preliminary sketches, my hand trembling slightly as I laid them on the table next to the gravy boat. I was thinking about a bio-integrated facade. I began, my voice full of a fragile hope. We could use kinetic panels that respond to the sun's path, not only for energy, but to create an ever-changing aesthetic. Ethan glanced at my sketches, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before his salesman's smile snapped back into place. He smoothly picked up one of my drawings, holding it up for my father to see. "Dad, look at this. It's fantastic. I can already see how I'm going to pitch this to Marcus Thorne." He turned my passionate, complex idea into a soundbite. "A living building. That's the angle. I'll tell them we're not just constructing a tower, we're giving the city a new heart." My father beamed, his chest puffing out. "That's my boy. Always seeing the big picture. That's how you land a whale like Ethelred." He didn't look at me. He looked at Ethan holding my drawing. My mother chimed in right on cue. "Arthur, you're right. Ethan has such a gift. And Layla, it's so wonderful that you can provide him with such strong material to work with. You two are unstoppable together." I felt the familiar cold wave wash over me. I wasn't the architect. I was the material provider. I was the ghost in their machine. I quietly gathered my sketches, the paper feeling flimsy and worthless in my hands. The taste of chicken turned to ash in my mouth. Despite the crushing weight of that dinner, a stubborn, defiant part of me refused to surrender. The Nexus Tower was more than just a job. It felt like my destiny. For the next 3 weeks, I lived and breathed the project. My small apartment became a chaotic studio, littered with crumpled sketches, empty coffee cups, and styrofoam models. I barely slept. I worked with a feverish intensity, my mind a whirlwind of structural calculations, airflow simulations, and aesthetic concepts. I wasn't just designing a building, I was pouring my entire soul into it. The bio-integrated facade, the geothermal exchange grid, the rainwater harvesting system that fed into a cascading vertical garden in the atrium, it was all mine. Every line, every curve, every solution to every problem was a piece of me. My only confidant during this time was Anya, a fellow architect at the firm. She was one of the few who saw past the family drama and recognized my talent. She would often stop by my desk late at night, bringing me a container of soup or a fresh cup of tea, her eyes wide as she looked at my screen. "Layla, this is its genius," she whispered one evening, looking at the 3D model of the atrium. "The way the light will filter through the garden, it's like a cathedral of glass and leaves. You cannot let Ethan take this." I shrugged, a weary gesture that I had perfected over the years. "It's the way it works, Anya. I do the work, he does the talking. As long as the firm gets the contract, that's what matters." But I didn't believe it. Not anymore. A part of me was screaming. The years of being silenced were creating a pressure inside me that I could no longer ignore. My internal monologue was a war zone. One voice, the voice of duty and family loyalty, told me to keep my head down, to do the work, to be the good daughter and sister. The other voice, a newer, angrier one, was asking, "Asterisk, when is it your turn? When do you get to own the thing you created? Ethan would periodically swing by my workspace, not to collaborate but to harvest ideas. "Hey sis," he'd say, leaning against my desk, not even looking at the intricate plans. "Just give me the highlights. The sexy stuff. What are the top 3 buzzwords I can use in the pitch?" He didn't care about the how or the why. He just wanted the shiny words. I'd explain the complex interplay of the geothermal system, and he'd distill it down to earth-powered. I'd detail the meticulous engineering of the kinetic facade, and he'd just call it a smart skin. He was taking my symphony and turning it into a jingle. There were moments of profound struggle, of hitting a creative wall so hard it felt like a physical blow. I remember one night, around 3 a.m., wrestling with the load distribution for the upper-level sky garden. The physics just weren't working. The weight was too much for the support structure I'd envisioned. I felt a surge of panic. For a desperate moment, I thought about going to my father. He was still a brilliant structural engineer in his own right. I even walked down the hall to his office, but the light was off. I imagined knocking on his door at home, showing him the problem. I could already hear his response. "Figure it out, Layla. That's what I pay you for. Ethan needs this proposal to be perfect." The thought was so clear, so real, that I turned around and walked back to my desk. The feeling of utter isolation was a physical weight. I was completely, totally alone in this. I pushed the frustration down, made another pot of coffee, and went back to the drawings. It was in that moment of despair that the solution came to me, a series of microtrusses inspired by the veining of a leaf. It was stronger, lighter, and more elegant than my original idea. I had solved it. Me. Alone. A few nights before the submission deadline, I was doing the final checks on the digital blueprints. Every file, every layer, every single line had come from my hand and my mind. As I stared at the screen, a memory surfaced unbidden. It was of my grandfather, my mother's father. He had been a stonemason, a craftsman from the old world. He had taken me to see a cathedral he had helped restore when I was a little girl. He had pointed high up to a corner, to a small, carved gargoyle that was slightly different from the others. It had a tiny, almost unnoticeable smile. "That's my mark," he had whispered to me, his voice rough but warm. In the old days, the builders, the artists, they would hide a little piece of themselves in the work. Not for the patrons, not for the priests. It was a signature for God, a promise between the maker and the thing that is made. The memory was so vivid it made my breath catch. A promise between the maker and the thing that is made. A flicker of defiance, stronger than any I had felt before, ignited in my chest. On impulse, I opened a new layer in the CAD program. My hands moved quickly, almost to their own accord. I designed a small, intricate symbol, a compass rose, with the 4 main points stylized to look like the nib of a fountain pen. It was a nod to both my love of exploration and design, and the act of drawing itself. My personal insignia. Then, with painstaking precision, I found a location in the dense grid of the blueprint's title block. Grid reference C26. I scaled my insignia down until it was almost microscopic, colored it the exact shade of gray as the grid lines, and merged it. It was there, but it was also not there. You would never see it unless you knew exactly where to look and zoomed in to an absurd degree. It was a secret, a whisper, a promise to myself. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I showed Anya the next morning. I pointed to the spot on the screen. "Zoom in," I told her. She leaned in, her eyes squinting, and then she gasped. "Layla, it's beautiful. It's your soul, hidden in plain sight." Hiding my soul. It felt both incredibly brave and deeply cowardly at the same time. The day of the submission, Ethan strode into my office like a conquering hero. "All set, sis? Got the files ready for me?" he asked, already reaching for the USB drive on my desk. He was wearing a new suit, radiating confidence. I handed him the drive. For a heart-stopping moment, I wanted to tell him about the watermark. I wanted to say, "Look closer. I am in there. I am the foundation of this entire thing." But the words wouldn't come. The old habits, the years of conditioning were too strong. I just nodded. It's all there, Ethan. The presentation, the animations, all the blueprints. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be appreciative but felt utterly dismissive. Great work, sis. You're the best back office person a guy could ask for. Seriously, I couldn't do it without you. The condescension was so thick I could taste it. He had no idea how true his words were. He couldn't do it without me. He couldn't do any of it. He walked out, the USB drive containing my masterpiece in his pocket, ready to claim it as his own. I sank into my chair, the silence of my office ringing in my ears. I had just handed over the best work of my life, and I had done it without a fight. The question was, what was I going to do about it? We didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, Ethan returned from the final presentation at Ethelred Corporation's headquarters. He didn't just walk into the office. He burst in, his face split by a triumphant grin. "We got it," he yelled, and the entire office erupted in cheers. My father, Arthur, was the first to reach him, clapping him on the back so hard Ethan stumbled. "That's my boy. I knew you could do it. Miller and Son is in the big leagues now." The pride in my father's voice was a physical blow. He didn't even glance in my direction. It was as if I was just another piece of office furniture. That evening, my parents threw an impromptu celebration party at their house. The whole family was there, cousins, aunts, uncles, all eager to bask in the reflected glory of Ethan's success. I found myself handing out champagne flutes, a forced smile plastered on my face, while Ethan stood in the center of the living room, holding court. He recounted the story of his presentation, embellishing every detail. He talked about the moment he unveiled the vision, the way Marcus Thorne's eyes had lit up when he spoke of the bio-integrated facade. He was using my words, my concepts, but weaving them into a narrative of his own genius. The worst moment came when my Aunt Carol, a well-meaning but clueless woman, cornered me by the appetizers. "It's all so exciting, Layla," she chirped. "Your brother is just a superstar. So, what is it you do at the firm, sweetie? Do you help him with his paperwork?" I stared at her, the champagne flute in my hand trembling. "I'm an architect, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I designed the tower." She laughed, a high, tinkling sound. "Oh, that's cute. It's so nice you have a little hobby. But a salesman like your brother, that's a real gift." I felt the blood drain from my face. A little hobby. My life's work, the culmination of my talent and passion, dismissed as a little hobby. I looked across the room and met Ethan's eyes. He had heard her. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug, a look that said, "What can you do?" And in that moment, the last vestiges of my hope that he was simply an oblivious beneficiary of our family's system crumbled. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew, and he didn't care. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the pit of my stomach. It was no longer just resignation. It was the first chilling touch of rage. A few days later, the official announcement came from Ethelred Corporation. They were holding a major press conference to unveil the winning design and introduce the visionary architect behind it. The firm was buzzing with excitement. My father was like a general preparing for a great victory. He called me into his office. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Layla," he said, not unkindly, "I need you to get Ethan ready. Prepare all the digital assets for the press conference. The big screen displays, the animations, the key blueprints. I want everything to be perfect. This is his moment to shine, and you're the best person to make sure the technical side is flawless." His words were a knife, twisted with casual precision. My job was to make sure his moment was perfect. I was the stagehand for his triumph. Ethan, now drowning in a sea of congratulatory calls and interview requests, was too busy to be bothered with the details of the project he was supposedly the architect of. He caught me in the hallway the day before the conference. "Layla, can you do me a huge favor?" he asked, his phone pressed to his ear. "I need a cheat sheet for the Q&A tomorrow. Just a one-pager. Bullet points. No need for the boring math stuff, just the big ideas. Keep it simple, something I can actually use." The request was so demeaning, so utterly dismissive of the complexity and artistry of my work that I was momentarily speechless. He wanted me to distill a symphony into 5 bullet points. A part of me, a dark, vengeful part, considered sabotaging him. I could give him the wrong information, or make it so simplistic it would sound idiotic. But my professionalism, the very quality they exploited, wouldn't let me. I would not stoop to his level. I would not compromise my own work. So I spent that night in the office, the city lights twinkling outside my window, painstakingly crafting a perfect, concise summary of the Nexus Tower's innovations. I wrote it with a clarity and precision that he would never be able to replicate. It was a masterpiece of summary. And as I saved the file and sent it to him, I realized something profound. The cheat sheet wasn't a crutch. It was a trap. It gave him the words, but not the understanding. It gave him the lyrics, but not the music. And if anyone asked him to sing, he would be utterly, hopelessly lost. A strange sense of calm settled over me. The resignation was gone. The anger was still there, but it was no longer hot and chaotic. It had cooled, hardened into something solid and sharp. It had hardened into a plan. The final dinner before the press conference was a masterclass in my family's unique brand of dysfunction. We were at a fancy restaurant, a celebratory meal that felt more like a wake. Ethan, dressed in yet another new suit, was trying to rehearse some of the technical points for my cheat sheet. It was a disaster. So, he said, clearing his throat and looking at me for approval, that the geothermal power comes from, tubes. And they connect to the water, the dirty water, and make the building smart. He looked so pleased with himself. I couldn't help it. The correction came out before I could stop it. Actually, the geothermal exchange is a closed-loop system integrated with the greywater recycling plant. The heat differential is what powers the low-voltage systems. It's not about making the building smart. It's about making it energy neutral. My father slammed his fork down on his plate. The sound made me jump. Layla, for God's sake, stop nitpicking. You're making him nervous. He's got the spirit of it, and that's what clients care about. The spirit. My mother jumped in, ever the peacemaker. Your father is right, dear. Ethan has to present this in a way people can understand. All that jargon just confuses things. I looked from my father's angry face to my mother's placating smile to my brother's blank incomprehension. They were a united front, a fortress of delusion. They weren't just ignoring my contribution, they were actively protecting his ignorance. They were terrified that a single crack of truth might bring the whole facade crashing down. In that moment, I saw them with perfect, painful clarity. And I knew I couldn't be a part of it for one more day. I excused myself from the table and went home. My apartment, my sanctuary of creation, suddenly felt like a cage. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of my window, and for the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a willing participant. I saw a fool who had enabled her own erasure for years, hoping that one day, her silence would be rewarded with recognition. It was a losing bargain. I picked up my phone and called Anya. My voice was shaking. I don't think I can go tomorrow, Anya. I can't sit there and watch him do it. I can't. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Anya's voice came through, firm and clear. Yes, you can. And you have to. You're not going there to watch him, Layla. You're going there for you. You built that tower in your mind before a single line was ever drawn. You deserve to be in that room when its birth is announced to the world. Her words cut through my despair. She was right. I had to be there. But I wouldn't be a spectator. I would be a witness. I hung up the phone, my resolve hardening. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I knew one thing for sure. The show was about to have a new director. The auditorium at Ethelred Corporation's headquarters was sleek, modern, and intimidating. It was filled with the low hum of anticipation. Rows of journalists were poised with their laptops and cameras. Industry giants, rival architects, and city officials filled the plush seats. I found my designated spot in the second row, a seat chosen to give me a perfect view of the stage and the family a perfect view of me. My mother and father were in the front row, right next to the reserved seats for the Ethelred executives. They were glowing, preening, soaking in the atmosphere of success. My mother turned and gave me a tight, anxious smile, a silent plea to behave. My father just stared straight ahead, his jaw set, as if willing the event to go perfectly. I gave them a small, unreadable nod and settled into my seat, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. I felt strangely calm, like the air before a storm. Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Ethelred, walked to the podium. He was a man who radiated quiet authority, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He spoke about his company's vision for the future, for a world where technology and nature could coexist. "We didn't just want a building," he said, his voice resonating through the state-of-the-art sound system. "We wanted a statement, a testament to innovation. And we found that vision in the proposal from Miller and Son." He smiled. "And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the visionary architect who brought that statement to life. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Miller." The room erupted in applause. Ethan walked onto the stage, waving, soaking it all in. He looked every bit the part of the triumphant genius. He shook Marcus Thorne's hand and took his place at the podium. Behind him, on a screen the size of a small building, a breathtaking 3D render of my Nexus Tower materialized, rotating slowly in space. My tower. I felt a surge of possessiveness, so fierce it almost made me stand up right then. But I held back. "Not yet." Ethan began his speech. He was good. I had to give him that. He was charming, articulate, and passionate. He used all the bullet points from my cheat sheet, weaving them into a compelling narrative about a building with a soul. He talked about the smart skin and the earth-powered core. He was selling my dream, and he was selling it well. The audience was captivated. I watched him, and a strange sense of detachment washed over me. I felt like I was watching an actor play a role I had written, speaking lines I had crafted. I remembered drawing those lines, the late nights, the frustrating dead ends, the exhilarating breakthroughs. Every word out of his mouth was a ghost of an hour of my life. I glanced at my parents. My mother had a tissue, dabbing at the corner of her eye. My father was staring at Ethan with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride. They were watching their son. They did not see me at all. After about 10 minutes, Ethan wrapped up his speech to another round of thunderous applause. "I'd be happy to take a few questions," he said, beaming. The first few were softballs from lifestyle bloggers and local news reporters. "What does it feel like to change the skyline? What was your inspiration?" Ethan handled them with ease, repeating his well-rehearsed sound bites. I felt my hands clench in my lap. The calm was beginning to fray. And then, a woman in the third row stood up. I recognized her instantly. It was Delia Finch from Architectural Review, one of the most respected and feared journalists in the field. She was known for her sharp mind and her intolerance for fluff. "Mr. Miller, Delia Finch, Architectural Review," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "A fascinating concept. You mentioned a revolutionary kinetic facade system. Could you please elaborate on the load-bearing challenges of integrating piezoelectric transducers directly into the curtain wall mullions, especially concerning the mitigation of harmonic resonance from wind shear at the upper levels?" The room went utterly silent. The question hung in the air, dense and heavy with technical specificity. It was a real question. A question for an architect. I watched Ethan's face. His smile faltered just for a second. The confidence drained from his eyes, replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. He had no idea what she was talking about. Piezoelectric transducers? Harmonic resonance? These weren't on the cheat sheet. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the screen behind him, as if my beautiful render could somehow save him. "Well," he began, his voice a little too high, the synergy of the system it's very robust. We've ensured through extensive modeling that the integration is seamless and strong." The vague, empty words fell into the silence like stones in a deep well. The confidence was gone. He was floundering, drowning in a sea of his own ignorance, and everyone in the room could see it. He shot a desperate, pleading look toward our father. But Arthur looked just as lost, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. The silence stretched, becoming more and more excruciating with every passing second. Marcus Thorne's expression, which had been one of polite interest, was now tightening into a thin line of disappointment and suspicion. The moment had arrived. With a steadiness that surprised even me, I stood up. My movement was small, but in the dead silent room, it felt like a seismic event. Every head turned towards me. I saw my father's face, his eyes wide with fury, and he hissed my name, a sharp, angry whisper. "Layla, sit down." My mother looked like she was about to faint, but I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Marcus Thorne, who had turned his sharp gaze on me. I saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of permission. That was all I needed. I took a deep breath, and my voice cut through the thick, uncomfortable silence. It was clear, calm, and unwavering. I can answer that question. I didn't wait for a further invitation. I walked from my seat to the aisle, and then towards the side of the stage. I didn't need to be at the podium. I stood on the floor, owning the space. All eyes were on me. The issue of harmonic resonance was a primary concern. I began, directing my answer to Delia Finch, but speaking for everyone in the room to hear. We're not just integrating the transducers into the mullions. We've designed a custom mullion profile that acts as a tuned mass damper. Each one contains a free-floating counterweight suspended in a viscoelastic fluid. At the specific wind shear frequencies we anticipate above the 40th floor, the counterweights oscillate out of phase with the structural vibrations, effectively canceling them out. It's a principle borrowed from seismic stabilization technology, but miniaturized and adapted for a facade system. We ran over 5,000 simulations to perfect it. I finished, and the silence in the room was different now. It wasn't awkward, it was attentive. Delia Finch nodded slowly, a look of deep respect on her face. "Thank you," she said. "That's very thorough." But I wasn't done. The plan, which had been a half-formed instinct, was now crystal clear. I turned to Marcus Thorne. "If I may, Mr. Thorne, a visual aid would be helpful in clarifying the design's authorship." Thorne's eyes narrowed, but he gestured to the tech booth. "Proceed." I turned my attention to the young man in the booth, who was staring at me, wide-eyed. "Could you please bring up blueprint file A401? It's the structural detail for the curtain wall." The beautiful render of my tower vanished, replaced by the dense, intricate black and white lines of my work. The air crackled with tension. "Now," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound authority, "could you please zoom in on the title block? The bottom right corner. Focus on grid reference C26. The technician's fingers flew across his keyboard. The image on the massive screen began to magnify. The grid lines of the title block grew larger and larger. The image pixelated for a moment, then sharpened as the high-resolution file loaded completely. And there it was. At first, it was just a slight thickening of the lines, a smudge. But as the zoom continued, it resolved into a clear, unmistakable shape. My shape. The intricate compass rose, with its fountain pen points, woven seamlessly into the fabric of the blueprint. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. It was a sound of dawning comprehension. I let the image hang there for a beat, a silent testament. Then I spoke, my voice steady and loud, a declaration of independence. That insignia is my personal watermark. It's on every single drawing, every plan, every blueprint for this project. I turned, and for the first time, I looked directly at my brother, who was standing at the podium, pale as a ghost. Then I looked at my father, whose face was a thunderous mask of disbelief and rage. Finally, I let my gaze sweep across the entire stunned room. "My name is Layla Miller, and I am the architect of the Nexus Tower." The world erupted. The silence shattered into a cacophony of reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, and a roar of conversation from the audience. Ethan stood frozen at the podium, a statue of public humiliation. My father had half risen from his seat, his face contorted in a silent snarl. In the chaos, a pair of calm, imposing security guards from Ethelred appeared at my side. One of them spoke into his wrist communicator while the other said, "Miss Miller, Mr. Thorne asks that you come with us, please." They escorted me through a side door, away from the pandemonium, leaving my family to face the storm I had unleashed. They led me down a quiet, sterile hallway and into a large, silent conference room. The door closed, shutting out the noise, and I was finally alone. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out over the city. My city. I could feel my entire body trembling, not from fear, but from the massive, seismic release of a lifetime of suppressed truth. A few minutes later, the door opened and Marcus Thorne entered, closing it softly behind him. He was alone. He didn't look angry. His expression was one of cool, detached assessment. He walked over to the window and stood beside me for a moment, following my gaze. "That," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "was quite a performance, Miss Miller." I finally turned to look at him. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to believe that. The reporter's question, your answer, it had the ring of authenticity. Your brother's answer had the ring of desperation." He paused, his sharp eyes studying me. "Walk me through it," he said. "The real story, not the press release. Start from the beginning." And so I did. For the next hour, I told him everything. I talked about the concepts, the struggles, the breakthroughs. I spoke with a passion and precision that had been silenced for years. He listened intently, not interrupting once, his gaze never leaving my face. When I was finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice measured. "My contract is with the entity known as Miller & Son Architecture. However, the intellectual property, the genius that I am paying for, clearly belongs to you. This presents a significant problem for your father and a fascinating opportunity for me." He then asked a question I wasn't expecting. "Why did you let it go on for so long?" The question was blunt, but not unkind. It forced me to look at my own complicity. "I suppose," I said, my voice faltering for the first time. "I was waiting for them to see me. I thought if my work was good enough, if I was brilliant enough, they'd have no choice but to acknowledge it." He gave a wry, almost sad smile. "Miss Miller, people like your father and brother don't see what's in front of them. They see what they want to see, what confirms their own narrative. Today, you showed them something they couldn't ignore." When I finally left that conference room, my future hanging in a strange and hopeful limbo, I found my family waiting for me in a private lounge down the hall. The moment they saw me, the fury erupted. "How could you?" my father roared, his face mottled with rage. He took a step towards me, his finger jabbing the air. "How could you do that to your brother? To this family? You have humiliated us. In public." My mother was sobbing, her usual composure shattered. "After everything we have given you, Layla, a job, a career, this is how you repay us." Ethan was just standing behind them, silent, his face ashen. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked broken, a hollow shell of the man who had stood on that stage an hour before. For the first time in my life, their anger didn't make me shrink. It was like watching a storm from behind a wall of thick glass. I felt nothing. "What did you give me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "A desk in the back of the office? The profound honor of watching my brother accept awards for my work? You didn't give me a career. I built one, in the dark, while you were busy shining a spotlight on him." I looked at my father. "I'm leaving the firm. I'm done." He scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You'll be nothing without the family name. You'll never work in this city again." I looked from his furious face to my mother's tear-streaked one, to my brother's empty stare, and I felt a profound, liberating pity for them. "We're about to find out if that's true," I said. And with that, I turned and walked away, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silent, opulent hallway. I didn't look back. 1 week later, I was sitting in a small, empty office space I had rented with the last of my savings. The walls were bare, the only furniture a cheap folding table and my laptop. The place smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. It was terrifying and exhilarating. My phone, which had been buzzing nonstop with a mixture of hate-filled texts from my extended family and tentative messages of support from old colleagues, rang with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Layla Miller?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "This is Sarah Chen, from the legal department at Ethelred Corporation. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Marcus Thorne." My heart leaped into my throat. "Yes, this is she." "Miss Miller," the lawyer continued, "I'm calling to inform you that Ethelred is exercising Clause 27B of our contract with Miller and Son. It's a key person provision, tying the contract to the continued involvement of the lead architect. Given the events of the press conference and our subsequent investigation, it is our position that the lead architect is, in fact, you, and that a material fraud has been committed. Therefore, we are officially terminating our contract with Miller and Son, effective immediately." I sank into my chair, my head spinning. I see. "Furthermore," she continued, "Mr. Thorne's offer still stands. Ethelred wishes to proceed with the Nexus Tower project, as designed. We are prepared to offer the contract to a new firm of your choosing, on the sole condition that you are its principal and lead architect. The contract, Miss Miller, is yours, should you want it." I looked around my empty little office. It wasn't empty anymore. It was the future. My voice was thick with emotion. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I want it." On the table in front of me was a stack of papers I had printed out that morning. On the top was a business registration application. In the blank for the company name, I had written, Layla Miller Architects. A few hours later, Anya arrived, her arms full. She carried a box containing the few personal items from my old desk, a ficus tree she had rescued for me, and a bottle of expensive champagne. She put it all down, looked at my stunned, happy face, and burst into tears. We hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. "I knew it. I knew you had it in you," she sobbed. "I am so proud of you." We popped the champagne and drank it out of coffee mugs, toasting to my new beginning. As we celebrated, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father is devastated. Please reconsider this for the sake of the family." I stared at the message for a long moment, at the familiar, toxic plea to sacrifice myself for their comfort. Then, with a steady finger, I deleted the message and blocked her number. On my laptop screen, I had a news site open. The headline was stark: Miller and Son in crisis as star architect splits amid fraud allegations. I closed the laptop. That was their story now, not mine. My story was just beginning. A year has passed since that day. I'm standing on a temporary viewing platform, 20 stories high, looking out over the rising steel skeleton of the Nexus Tower. The sounds of construction, the clang of metal and the shouts of workers, are music to my ears. It's real. I made it real. Anya is my partner now, the best partner an architect could ask for. We're building more than just a tower. We're building a firm based on collaboration, respect, and a shared passion for creating beautiful things. A few months ago, I won the prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize for the Nexus Tower's design. During my acceptance speech, I thanked my grandfather, the stonemason, for teaching me to always sign my work. And I thanked Anya, my chosen family, for believing in me when I had forgotten how to believe in myself. The journey was harder than I could have ever imagined. I learned that claiming your own work, your own life, can be a far more difficult act of construction than building a skyscraper. I spent so many years seeking validation from people who were incapable of giving it. I thought their recognition was the prize. But the real prize was learning that external validation is meaningless if you haven't first validated yourself. The real architecture wasn't just about the tower. It was about demolishing the prison of my family's expectations and building a life of my own design, on my own terms. What I went through was a painful, public, and ultimately liberating experience. It taught me that your value is not determined by who acknowledges it. It exists independently, waiting for you to claim it. Sometimes, being underestimated isn't a curse, it's a superpower. It allows you to work, to grow, to become brilliant in the shadows so that when you finally step into the light, You're so dazzling they can't look away. I want to hear from you now. Share your own story in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated or had your ideas stolen? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from it? Reading your stories is a powerful reminder that we are not alone in these struggles. If my story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding your voice and reclaiming your power. Sharing this video with someone who might be going through something similar could be the little bit of encouragement they need to start building their own new future. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey and for listening to my story. I wish you all the strength to sign your own work, in whatever form it takes, and to build a life that is truly your own.